So take me back to last week. Friday, had a meeting at Columbia. What was the conversations leading up? Like, can you explain the decision-making rubric or matrix or whatever we want to call that, that led up to going into Columbia and talking to the staff?
Yeah, and I think so. That's a great question, and the context of that answer is huge, right? Because we want to spend some time marinating in the idea that we've been in budget reduction mode since June of 2022, and so I think that it's everything stems back to that date, and then as we have learned more about what that situation entails for us as a district with Superintendent Eagle, and then moving on to this year, it's us looking at what are our options at any time. And so kind of exploring all of those ideas. And then when you think about those 2 points in time, right? What I talked about on Tuesday night when I mentioned we have the budget crisis or situation or whatever we want to call it of 2022, but then we have the annual impacts or the perennial impacts of declining enrollment every year that we have to adjust for. We have been having these conversations. It's pretty much ongoing, and so that's far too long for me to share that, but I wanted to give you that context and your listeners that context as well, because it's not like we separate ourselves from that work ever. Right. It's just part of this kind of budgeting process that we're learning this is our second year learning about what this process is and how it works, and we're learning that obviously the way things rolled out last week is not the way we want to do business, but I'll just kind of let you know for your viewers' sake, and Diana helped me with this, we were proposing the outline of a plan to our kind of internal stakeholder groups, and just sharing with them the ideas that we have for budget reduction process and what this is going to look like. We have those conversations in confidence because we need to be able to do that work and to be able to have these conversations, but also get feedback in those conversations too. Like, what are people's thoughts, and how are we presenting the information and those sort of things. And the idea is that we were going to roll these items out over the course of the next few weeks. However, within 18 hours or less, potentially, it was already in our system in 3 or 4 different areas. And so that was kind of where this knee-jerk reaction to make sure to get in front of our staff in person directly and share the information as we knew it at that time. And so that's a hard conversation. I mean, it was a hard conversation no matter what. And again, I mean, I just feel compelled to share my apologies to the staff of Columbia, the students of Columbia, the families, and also our greater community, because this is not the way to do this work, and we've obviously seen the rollout of that. So that's kind of the long and the short. Dom, share something else. She says everything better. So.
Yeah, no, I think Kory really nailed it. This is not the way that we envisioned this process going out. The magnitude of the work that needs to be done to align our revenues with our expenditures is significant, and it's widespread, and it affects everyone. So that was not our intention, the way that it rolled out. At this point, it is what it is, and we're really trying to do quite a bit of damage control to get in front of that, and also share our why. Why are we looking at this? No one wakes up in the morning and says, today we're going to close a school. That's the absolute last thing on the table that any one of us wants to look at. But those are hard choices that often have to be made, and we're seeing happen in our state and play out across our country. So we need to be transparent about this process because it involves multiple stakeholders. But like Kory said, sharing that information with our people first was our priority at that time, and making sure that we honored the people that would be impacted by this proposed move because it was so significant.
Sure, yeah. going back to the first major factor, the clerical error, the infamous clerical error.
Yes,
of
right.
yes, there it is.
2022.
Yes.
There's been a lot of people who have reached out to me and said, we want more clarity on that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, can you provide more clarity on that? How did that happen? And who's at fault?
Right. So I'll speak a little bit about the budgeting error to the extent that I can, and I think it was a budgeting error or a clerical error, as you suggest, and it really involved our ESSER dollars and our COVID funding, to the tune of about $9 million. And the idea is that it moved from one spreadsheet to the next, and it made the appearance that we had a surplus of $9 million that we could address all of the concerns in our district at that time. And we were utilizing that knowledge throughout the course of that 21-22 school year, and making decisions as if we had that surplus of dollars. And so when people had needs like, hey, we need more board certified behavior analysts to address all the discipline concerns that are happening or behavioral concerns. And we were like, well, it looks like I think we could probably address that need. And then, man, our kids are just, COVID was hard on our kids, right? And so we have kids that are in trauma. We need some more counselors at the middle school level. So we're okay, well, I think we can probably do this. And the story just kind of continues, like how I don't think it was anyone's maliciousness in any way, shape, or form. It was, how do we address the needs of our buildings post-pandemic? And it looks like we have dollars to do that. And so we made those decisions, and had those conversations and built our budget for the 22-23 school year, all based on this false assumption of what happened. And it's a tough scenario. We did isolate it to our finance team at the time and our CFO at the time, and that person is no longer with our system, and neither is our executive leader from that time as well. We know Dr. Gordon left. It was right at that. It was a convergence of Dr. Gordon leaving and Superintendent Eagle coming in that we found that, and it was kind of like this. Well, surprise, Bill. Thanks for helping us, guide the ship at this point. So, yeah.
Yeah, and just to reiterate some of the points that Kory made, at the time, our system was flooded with up to $20 million of ESSER funds, and those were the COVID relief dollars that were really meant to help support schools deliver education. And when our kids came back from COVID, my own two kids included, we saw significant behaviors. We had buildings in crisis, just trying to support kids and make sure that they could show up every day and be ready to learn and learn deeply. So by providing those additional staffing resources, at the time, we were leveraging those COVID dollars, which were unfortunately inflated. We were spending dollars that weren't necessarily there to be used. So trying to recover from that has been a challenge. They're one-time dollars. They're what we call soft money. That money is leaving the system and is not a sustainable funding source for staffing, which is why we're at where we're at with at least that issue is that money has left our system, and then we have to figure out ways to backfill that. Because those needs are still there. We have to be real about that too, is that some of those lingering behavior issues are still happening and playing out, and our staff still need the support. Kids still need that additional layer of support, which makes this work just that much more challenging when we think about students' needs and what's best for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so going into the savings, overall, between the $3 million that you'll save from closing Columbia, and then the 2.3 million from the high school and middle school schedule changes, that amounts to 5.8, we're up 5.3 million, I believe.
Yeah, just a little over 5 million. So we're kind of sticking with that round number of 5 because that's easier to think about.
Right, and that's over really taking 2 years to fix this problem, as I understand it, right?
We're hoping that next year we are able to realize a reduction next year, and then we're going to have to go into a second year. But we think that, I guess, yeah, you're right. I guess it is. We're looking at it as a multi-year fix, and one of the things that is the multi-year piece is every year there's enrollment decline. We have to adjust. It isn't something that we can sustain over time just based on where we are, I think, as a system. And I think that's the smart thing to do. And so what we're really trying to do is, how do we adjust our entire system to be flexible and nimble based on enrollment? Because the trends that we're seeing and the projections are, it's not going to get any better. Every time we have a kindergarten class that is drastically less than the graduating class, we know that we're going to have some issues along the way. And it's compounded by all of the amazing options that our community has for other schooling besides public education as well. So we do see it as a multi-year piece for sure. And I don't know if I answered your question correctly. Okay.
Actually, you kind of segued into another question that I had, which is how much of an impact, because it is one of the factors that you had on your slides, the impacts of private and charter schools on this attrition of enrollment. How much of an impact do you think people putting up billboards that say Wenatchee schools are failing has on that perception of your efficacy?
All right, that is a great question, and I'm glad you asked that, because it's something that we want to address, and I think there's multiple ways of looking at that, because I think this situation that we're in right now, when we talk about closing Columbia, that has an impact on our community and an impact on what the community thinks of us as a district and how we're managing taxpayers' dollars and how we're educating our kids. And so that's huge. A billboard like that, it makes people question, and it puts ideas in our heads as well that we can kind of glom onto. And if there is something that goes awry, then those things help to confirm and validate those thoughts. But Dom, at the beginning of the school year, as we're diving into some of the research and where we are with enrollment, we did a quick guesstimate of, well, it's an educated guess and some actual numbers, but between students that choice out of our district, for whatever reason, we also get a fair number, well, an equal number almost, of students that choice in, but then we have a homeschool component, and then we also have our private and our charter schools. It's a lot of kids. I mean, anywhere from 12 to 1,600 kids potentially that are in these spaces, and what a great thing for our community to have those options, and for parents to know this fits my student, this fits my student, this fits. That's great from a parent perspective. But it is challenging, when we look at that. And so again, I'm wandering and meandering, so I'll kick it over to Diana to synthesize it.
Yeah, I think the landscape of education has changed and was really underscored during the COVID pandemic, where people began to think about education differently. And the Wenatchee School District needs to think about how we deliver education and what that model looks like, and how we can be responsive to our community. So, as Kory said, we need to be flexible and agile, and so we need to have a system that's nimble and ready for that. Valley Academy in our district is a great example of an area where we have seen extreme growth that we've not seen in a number of years. It's our parent partner program, where essentially, to make it really simple, it helps support parents deliver an independent homeschool experience for their students in the home, but it also pairs that with Wenatchee School District, curriculum and instruction for classes that maybe they don't feel comfortable or don't want to teach, or for whatever reason. But we've seen growth there. They have a wait list of 25. So that's just an example of where we're seeing ebbs and flows in people's desires for education for their students. So we need to be flexible with that. Now, when you have issues, related to public perception, that just means that we need to work harder to share our story and also celebrate our successes, and make sure that people know our highly qualified staff, what kind of training and education they have, how they're delivering, high quality instruction every day and meeting the needs of our unique learners that come into our buildings every day with their unique lived experience and in need of that individualized attention. And the success that our kids are having. They're doing incredible things. And so the more we can help educate our community on what does happen in our halls and what successes our kids and our staff are having, that's incumbent upon us to do that. So, and we'll keep doing more of that as much as possible.
Sure, absolutely. Check my monitor there. So, I think there was some confusion with the count of students at Columbia.
Oh, yeah.
If you're not counting TK kids, which is the transition to kindergarten, I learned a lot about that this
Yes.
week.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then you've got 314. But if you do count those kids, you've got 340. And you know, the metaphor I used was like, if you're in a horse race and it's a nose, winning by a nose, photo finish, that swing of that amount of kids actually puts Columbia in a different space when you're counting overall students. And so my question is, why wouldn't you count all the heads under the roof rather than just K through 5? Because those TK kids are using resources, they are being cared for, they are being educated, they're being fed on the premises, just like a K through 5 student would.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was a great point that the staff member brought up, that there's the disparity. And we, for whatever reason, when we were comparing all of the elementary schools, we took that K5 number, not because we didn't value the TK, but it did kind of level our playing field at that time. But we realized we need to be counting those students as well. They're part of our community, they're part of that school's footprint, and they're part of all of the students that Columbia takes care of. And so, yeah, that was a really good point. And to the point of transition to kindergarten, I'm glad you did some work. It's an amazing program, and we see that as not only a place where the Wenatchee School District can grow, not only with enrollment, but also just kind of grow and fill the rest of our schools like we're trying to do anyway, but also a potential place that it just impacts our community and our community's young learners. Like the results of the students that are in TK when they roll into kindergarten classroom, our teachers know exactly who they are, they know exactly what they've done, and they're ready for school in a way that other students aren't necessarily. So for a community program, that's what we need to look at down the road, is how do we support our community of learners by getting more kids in TK. Yeah. It's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, TK definitely is a growth area. You probably know that there's a significant gap in high quality early learning, not only in Wenatchee, but across our state, across our nation. That's a challenge, and having access to that and making that equitable for people who don't have access or the means to be able to pay for that. And that's expensive. Having had 2 kids go through, daycare, you celebrate the day that your kid is, going to public school, right? So TK provides that avenue for 4-year-olds to get that jump start and make sure that we're giving them a solid foundation as they transition into kinder. If you talk to those, the 2 teachers at Columbia and the one at Mission View, they'll tell you, and the teachers teaching older grades, that is a significant transition for those kids when they get to kindergarten, because they know the routines, they know the structure, they've been in school, and that makes that transition a lot easier for many of their peers that are coming in. They're well ahead. It also, again, provides that free access to families who need that support, and it's delivered by educators in our district who are highly qualified to do the work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that kind of speaks to the community of the neighborhood around Columbia. There's 2 of the 3 TK programs are at Columbia, and I think that kind of speaks to, like you said, the need of this population of people, high minority and low income for the most part, if you look at the breakdown. So, going to this theme, and a few people brought it up at the meeting on Tuesday, you know, maybe we impact, the enrollment is smaller, but the impact to this vulnerable group is very great. What's the balance, you know, there that goes into this rubric of decision making, where we compare, you know, a vulnerable population that we're highly impacting versus another group of population that whose kids could better handle this sort of transition.
Yeah.
And I don't like the idea, because as soon as you start to do this, you start to have fingers pointing, and you say you should shut down that school, you should shut down that school. And I don't really necessarily want to point the finger at what school should be shut down, because none should be shut down.
Correct.
Let's face it.
100%.
You know?
Yes.
But I think there's a valid question there, where it's like, we have these students that are pretty vulnerable for the most part. Why them?
Right, right. And I think, Diane, I'll let you go, but yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, Columbia is a great representation of our district as a whole. We serve, our school district is a high poverty district as a whole. We have many students that qualify for migrant ELL services. We have over 54% Hispanic Latino in our community. That's who we are, that's who we serve. And so regardless of what school would be chosen, those groups would be impacted. So in our rubric, as we broke it down and began looking at all the different possibilities, those were things we had to think through. We also had to think through size. What is the magnitude of the number of people impacted? What were some of the logistical transportation challenges? How could we mitigate those and make, you know, a switch to a different school? Maybe it's a closer one. We don't have to transport people, you know, as far. So there were a lot of factors that really went into that evaluation, which, as you said, is not easy. We don't want to think about our schools in that way. But we really did need to dig into the details there and really think critically about proximity, who's being served, how we would serve them, and then also how we might get them to where they need to go to have the least impact possible.
Yeah.
Diana summed it up really well.
Well, and I would just add too, I think because we serve such a high population of students with these unique needs, we know how to do this work. Our district has invested a lot of time, energy, behind making sure that all of our educators are prepared to support those unique needs. So, and our buildings, the other buildings where potentially Columbia students would go, they're ready to open their arms and wrap around those kids, and they recognize the challenge that it's going to bring for them making that transition, and for their families too. So it's the whole child. So that gives me reassurance as a parent of young children too, if this were to impact me, knowing that our educators are there for all of our kids and truly do understand our community and are supporting, you know, kids who have similar challenges to what our students at Columbia experience.
Yeah, that was good. One of the things that I would add to, because Diana, I was going to share that our other schools were ready with open arms.
Everybody knows that. They're ready.
And it's actually really powerful to see, because enrollment decline has hit the elementary the hardest. I mean, our principals are asking us, get more kids to our school. We are empty, and well, not empty, but we have room, and we want to love on other students. And the other thing that I think that Diana didn't mention was, what is the likelihood and the ability of other schools to absorb schools? Not all schools have, you know, a population under 350 that could be absorbed in different places. And then you did mention the transportation implications and how long students are on buses, and how long they're from where they're coming in from out of town. And so we want to be really cognizant of what that looks like. And then, as Diana mentioned, how can kids potentially in the Columbia boundary still walk to some schools? There might still be an opportunity, whether that's Washington and Lincoln, depending on where students are. And we know that we're going to have to support those students and our families with care individually. And really, I just think of that gentle, warm handoff, because it can't be any other way. There's too much at stake right now. So I appreciate the question, because it's a delicate balance, and we really want to be authentic with our students and families.
Yeah, and just one last point too is the services that a student might be getting don't just disappear when they no longer could go to Columbia. Those services follow that student, and we're positioned and prepared in those other buildings to continue that continuity of service as well. So I think that's really important for people to know and understand. The students aren't being, left out on the street.
Yeah.
We're ready to bring them in and support them with those services, as well as we offer what's called a guaranteed and viable curriculum, and that's something our educators have worked incredibly hard to build. What that means is across our system, regardless of what neighborhood you live in or what school you attend, your child is getting the same education, the same pacing, and the same experience as a student at another school across town. We have a high mobility rate in our district, so we have kids that move around to our different buildings within our district. That's critical to make sure we continue, and again, that continuity of learning, so that their trajectory is that they can, reach that unlimited potential that they have. So that's really important for us, and that's something that will help support in this transition if it were to happen.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of goes into my next question, which is, and I'm just pulling up a photo of the boundaries, busing and boundaries, and if you look at it, you've got South Wenatchee, and you've got some kids that are bused from South Wenatchee past Columbia up
To Newberry.
to Newberry and Lewis and Clark.
Yep.
And really, if you just kind of extended Columbia's boundaries to the river, adjacent, right, to the what would be the I'm terrible with directions, but right down to the river, you essentially take away the busing that goes to Lewis and Clark and John Newberry, and those kids, that would extend the boundaries. Why did the boundaries look like that?
Those boundaries were created. We might have to look in the history book, but they were created a while ago. But it was, I believe, it was an archaic attempt at diversifying the schools as they were laid out at the time. So and so that's why you have these little slivers of students that go all the way up to Newberry, when it seems like why would we do some of that?
Right.
But it
it's
was
a small area.
At the time, that was the work that the demographers were doing to, I think to create diversity in the schools.
Right, create some balance of diversity.
Yeah.
I think an important thing for people to know is that, because we've fielded this question quite a bit. Well, why doesn't the district just reboundary the entire district? It's probably time that we do that. And yes, it probably is time that we do that, and that's something that we've been actively, starting the process on as early as this fall, working with Davis Demographics, our demographer, to really evaluate that. However, reboundarying the whole district doesn't solve the problem. It takes the same number of kids that are declining and just spreads them out. And that would also disrupt that would impact every family almost in the Wenatchee School District. That would be a significant shift. So at this time, by kind of isolating that to one building, we have the potential to impact a smaller number that could be absorbed by neighborhood schools or neighboring schools, and really, again, try to minimize that impact as much as possible. But I think that's just a really critical point, that a reboundarying doesn't give us more kids. We still have the same amount of kids. It just spreads them around and doesn't help us when it comes to making staffing reductions.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Talking about, I think that there's some myths around property prices are going up, but enrollment is going down. How does that work with the local effort assistance dollars?
Yeah,
and this is
Elliot.
something that I kind of had to drill down into more, because how does that work where it actually is kind of a net negative for the district when property prices go up and enrollment goes down?
It doesn't make sense, does it?
Yeah.
It really doesn't. And it's a formula at the state level. That's not something that we have control over. But yeah, Kory has a great way of explaining it.
I don't know if I do, because it's really hard to understand. And
yeah.
if we look at the LEA, I mean, it's hard because it's related to our levy funds, right? So when we went out for $2.10 in 2021 instead of $2.50, because that was a very turbulent time in our world, because we're still in the pandemic, and how are we going to have our taxpayers help support the school district at this time? So you find a happy medium, and we did that, and that's been great. And what I've learned from that is as housing prices do go up, and they did during that time, and we in the last 8 years even, it's been exponential, but we don't receive more funding as the housing prices, and you probably found this in your research too, and it was wild. We have to wait for the next levy, and then it kind of resets. And so if we went out for $2.10 now, it would be quite different monetarily, but also inflation is different too. So things kind of have a way of catching up to themselves. So it's just kind of interesting how that works. And so the local effort assistance dollars is to help support districts that didn't go out for a full levy or are property poor. And so we received those dollars, and it was different in 21 than it is now, and it slowly is just going away. So yeah, we don't expect to realize much of that in the future.
How much of this decision is impacted by our failure to pass the last bond?
This decision, in terms of what we need to do for making budget reductions.
Yeah, like if we would have passed the last levy or the last bond, would that have changed this current circumstance that we're
No,
I don't think so at all.
Yeah.
No. That's really an aside to that. The bonds are for building, they're for construction. Levy is for learning. That's local dollars that help support extracurricular, co-curricular programs and support services associated with that. But the narrowly failed bond for Wenatchee High School, had it passed, this would be the first year we would be in a brand new Wenatchee High School. So that's an impact.
We might bring some other students in from other areas.
It certainly would be attractive, new facilities, and that makes a big difference for, I think, businesses who are recruiting. We want somebody to come to our community and see that we, have great supported schools and great facilities that match those schools. So I think that potentially that had an impact, but it really is separate from the situation that we're up against right now, which is, again, those enrollment declines, which a lot of factors contribute to that, but also an increase in the cost of doing business. We all feel that in our pocketbooks at home, right? So we all know how expensive it is to go to the grocery store and buy food for our families, pay our bills. Everything costs more. School districts are no different. So it costs us more money, to have our staff. We're in the people business. 85% of our budget is people. That's what we do. But it costs more to have employees from, just inflationary costs related to our insurance and what we call IPD. It's just cost of living increases, those types of things. That are mandated, by the state of Washington and somewhat out of our control, but those costs keep going up for us as well. And when revenues don't match expenditures, we find ourselves in the situation where we need to make some changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to, not to belabor that point, but something like an M&O levy, right, a maintenance and operations levy, that would be able to be put towards maintaining elderly facilities,
absolutely,
and bringing those back up to code or to standards, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so there's an EP&O levy, which is your educational programs and operations levy, which would be slightly separate than like a capital projects levy. That would be for, making improvements to a building. Our EP&O is really our sustaining dollars from our local community that help pay for athletics. They help pay for our arts programs. They help pay for our nurses and additional custodians. They really fill the gap where state funds kind of leave us. So they help fill the gap so that we can deliver a well-rounded education. But yeah, running a levy that was specific to a capital projects could be for adding a wing onto a building or replacing an aging HVAC system.
Right.
And those are pieces of the overall budget puzzle.
Yep.
And you can tell me to be quiet at any
Nope,
time. But
I think it's good.
when
It's good.
we're in the process of completing, just probably next month, I think we'll get it, our complete survey and study.
Yes. Yep.
So every so often, school districts need to look at our buildings and see, what state are they in? Because it's expensive to maintain these buildings, especially one like Wenatchee High School. It's the size of 3 football fields put together, and you have all the stuff in it that you have to maintain. So we need to look at what those costs are for operationally, just to maintain and keep those safe and thriving learning environments for our kids and our staff. So those are things we have to evaluate along the way. We're a business too. We have to make sure our physical plant is intact and well supported, as well as the delivery of education that happens within it.
And I think that one part to add on, Diana, nice job, is that we have not been able to have a concentrated focus on facilities for a while, which is unfortunate. I mean, we look at the last bond that failed, and then we put the pandemic in there, and then with an interim superintendent who teed up a lot of things for us to be where we are now, is we're poised to have all of the information that we need to start really building out what does our 5 and 10 year facilities plan look like. And we're excited about that because we'll have another EP&O levy that will go out in 2025. There's no question we have to do that, and we'll be leaning on our community to help support that because, as Diana mentioned, there's a state funding model that funds some of our teachers, some of our counselors, some of our nurses, like some of everything, and then that levy brings everything else. And sometimes it's technology, and sometimes it's always our athletics and extracurriculars. But all of that is in that general fund that we're looking at right now. That's in a state of misalignment.
In jeopardy if we wouldn't pass that in 2025.
Yeah, and the EP&O levy that we'll be putting on the ballot in a year from now, essentially, is really a renewal. It's a renewal of what we have, but like Kory said, might be a little bit of an increase. But those dollars are really critical to do what we do. I can't imagine a school district without those dollars because they're so critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me see here. I've been asking my questions out of order.
Oh, no problem.
So, people have expressed, I think, a sense of, what's a good word? They feel powerless, right? They feel like this is a done deal.
Yeah.
It's not going to change. There's an RCW that mandates that a 90-day period must happen, that you must have like one public hearing, at least one public hearing dedicated to this. The school board meeting the other day wasn't even on the agenda, and it became the one topic of discussion for that meeting. My question is there any way that Columbia can be saved?
That's a great question, and I think that I think that the process that needs to take place is going to be the important piece to that, and we're building out with the board what they feel their needs are to get all of the information and to have a fair look at what not only what the grand scheme of the budget is, which they're in tune to, but what does it look like for this year and what does it look like for budgeting for next year. So we need a few more budget committee sessions, and we need a budget workshop, which we thankfully have planned for February, but we may need to speed up that timeline a little bit because we want to make sure that the board doesn't feel like they have a hasty decision in the process. And I think that's one of the miscommunication pieces is in the way that this was rolled out, and I take full ownership of that, is that there is a district plan that we put forward. It has our 3 big buckets on there as we shared on Tuesday night, and that's our plan, and that may be a done deal. But there's also the process piece too, and that's where things got confused, and I don't think I did a good job of explaining that as well with our Columbia staff, because they felt like it was a done deal as well too. And I think that we are putting these public hearings together, and we're actually going to do 2 of them. And Diana has been scheduling those for us, and so we're excited about that opportunity to hear from our community. And there very well could be that the board does not feel like they either have enough information to make a good decision, or they don't feel like they had enough time. Like, those are all very real. And so it becomes incumbent upon the district to plan well and plan accordingly in that process.
Yeah, we will be having 2, so one in March and one in April, and we'll be communicating next week specifically about the dates and locations and times so that people can come and share feedback with the board. So that is that listening opportunity for them to come and share. Ultimately, the decision does rest with the board at that May 14th regular board meeting. That's when it's expected they will take action on this decision. However, I think it's really important to know that that we need to be thinking about a plan B. So we have a budget reduction target amount of $8.6 million that we need to figure out how do we get there. If that doesn't happen, then what? So and that's the work that we're doing and have been doing leading up to this point. We will be putting together a more detailed analysis beyond what was shared at the board meeting, and we even shared additional information with Columbia staff this past Wednesday, just about the decision-making process that we went through to get to this point, and gave them a sense of some of the different options that we looked at, or different things that we looked at or have exhausted to get to a point where we would need to look very seriously about the closure of a school. But we'll be putting together that analysis. That'll be presented to the board in some detail. That's part of that board policy and the RCW, so part of that process. So we'll have a written plan that people can review and just kind of marinate in and understand what the why behind that, because I think that's the biggest thing, why. But we also have to think about, if it doesn't happen, what then is reduced? What are the other areas that we look at? And there's only so many areas that you can make reductions. So, and you kind of have to leave that up to your imagination a little bit as to what those could be. But those are the hard conversations that are happening here and that we have to really think through.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said multiple times throughout the week to folks, I think at least to you, Diana, but as well as other people in the district, I don't envy you.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think anybody does at this point. So, I appreciate you sitting down with me and talking about this stuff and taking the time, because
Absolutely.
I think that, there are a lot of questions in the community.
There are.
And there's a lot of big feelings, and there's a lot of emotions,
Yes, absolutely.
and there's a lot of maybe not so great information, or not fully whole information.
Absolutely.
So I think an opportunity like this gives people who want to drill down and get the details the opportunity to do that. Really, the only other couple questions I had, I just wanted to 2 questions, and it's kind of a 2-parter, is this idea of land being sold can only go back into the capital projects. So that's to buy more land or build or whatever.
Correct. Yes. Yeah, that would be making improvements on buildings, building buildings. But yes, so only the sale of real estate would have to go back into that and could not be used for operational expenses or to pay for staffing.
Right. So if enrollment's going down and you're holding on to these land, these properties that maybe were earmarked or thought to be maybe one day the site of a school. If enrollment's going down, why hold on to that land?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and something that we have thought about as well, and just wondering, the other question too is an optimistic one, is kind of the why not hold on to it as well, because we are optimistic that there are going to be opportunities in our valley for growth that we don't see right now. I mean, we're hoping and really kind of putting all of our thoughts in that. And so at this point, it's hard to imagine us outgrowing the current facilities that we have, but it could happen. And I don't know if that means that you need to have such and such amount of acres on Okanagan or such and such amount of acres up Springwater, but it does give us those opportunities for growth. And where I think we might see some growth is what are we doing in the CTE world? Where could magnet schools pop up, and where can we bring in other ideas from other areas? Kind of like the Technical Skills Center, like those kind of ideas. But there is not a very compelling reason, why to hang on to it, but there also isn't a compelling reason of why not to hang on to them either. And I think that optimism is huge.
Yeah, we've tried to really think creatively too, and I want to make clear that our district has really tried to think about the future, and I mean, there's so many what-if scenarios, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot going on in our community, and over the last 10 years, we've seen this community change.
Yes.
People aren't moving here with droves of children buying homes. That demographic has changed. People are coming here to retire and enjoy the amazing quality of life that we have here in the Wenatchee Valley. So we have to get real about some of those things, but we also have to partner with people who are the experts, who are really looking at land usage and development. So that's the city, that's the county, that's the ports, and really start thinking about property. And we've thought and had conversations about, well, we have some property. What if, we could do this, and that might mean a development that could potentially mean more students. So yes. I want to make clear that we're really thinking about those things. Yeah. We're not short-sighted in looking at property. We are probably one of the largest property owners in the city of Wenatchee. Mm-hmm. But that is really something that we are thinking about, and trying to evaluate what the best decision would be moving forward. But it's certainly something that is talked about, and that we're trying to, again, as we reimagine what does education look like and how we're meeting the needs, but also how can we be contributing to the overall growth that meets our needs, but the community at large.
Totally. Mm-hmm. And so, and just to clarify, that rule that says land sales must go back into the capital budget, is that something that the school board dictates? Is that state law?
There's state law that's wrapped around that. Yeah, there's also RCWs that are related to the purchase and sale.
So it's not like the school board could be like, well, actually, we're going to change that rule, and we're going to sell land, and we're going to put that into operations.
Right. I think the other important thing to know is just because you sold property and you got a lump sum of money, that's not an ongoing source of revenue. Right. So again, it's similar to the money that came in from COVID. It's one-time dollars that are going to end. So it's not a sustainable funding source. And it also doesn't keep up with the cost of inflation. So we always have to be thinking about those things as well. So while yes, it would potentially mean some money into the district, it wouldn't necessarily sustain our needs moving forward.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, those annual budget needs.
Mm-hmm. Annual budget needs that we all, like I said, we all experience in our personal lives at home, and it's hard. Yeah. It's really hard. And when you have a system as large, we have 1,200 employees. One of the largest employers in Wenatchee. It's a big system with a lot of moving parts, and school finance is complicated. It's hard to understand. And there are a lot of rules and regulations that are beyond our control that we need to make sure we're maintaining within.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. The only other last question I had was just kind of something that I realized this week is, is the Davis Arneal law firm still the lawyer for the school district, or is it Pacifica Law Group?
Well, we contract with both of them, yeah. And so I would say for most of our operational questions that we have on our day-to-day business, we reach out to Pacifica, but we still do have a contract with Davis and Arneal. Yeah.
Because the other day at the meeting, Danielle Marchand stood up and spoke, and she mentioned something about maybe this could potentially negatively impact my professional relationship with the school district. Mm-hmm. Is that true? Why would she be worried about public comment?
I don't. That's a great question, because public comment and our professional lives are two different things. She's a citizen of the community. She can say her piece, I think, without recourse from anything that we do. And then what we rely on with Danielle is her savvy in the educational world of legal, and so we don't see those two impacting, and that would be a conflict of interest anyway. So it wouldn't. She doesn't have anything to worry about. We appreciate Danielle coming to the board meeting and share her comments as well. And then we appreciate what happens when we're talking about business as well. In fact, she and I had some email communications yesterday about information that was very pertinent to some legal aspects of the district. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we did not? I've just got a couple minutes left on this card.
I'm sure.
Yeah, we probably filled it up.
It's like a 15-minute card. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you think the public should know that maybe I didn't ask about?
I think you did a great job, Dom, and thanks for coming at it from helping our community understand the situation and getting a little bit of the district's perspective. But I think the main thing for us to close with is we know our community is hurting right now, and we know that there's been, the way that this process has happened, there's some distrust that's out there, and I just want to encourage our community to know and understand that that's not the intent of this work. The intent of this work is to help us align our revenues and expenditures so that Wenatchee School District continues to thrive and continues to provide world-class education for our young folks for the next many decades. And we are having to look at very hard things, and we're having very hard conversations. And just for the community to know that we will regain the trust that has been lost through this process, and we will do what's best for the kiddos. Yeah, so thank you for that.
Anything to add?
I was just going to say this is hard.
Yeah.
It's hard on the heart.
Yeah.
And
It sure is.
it's not easy for anyone, but I think Kory said it well. So
Yeah.
we make decisions that we feel are best for our kids, both now and into the future.
Well, I've got 3 kids in the district.
You
I know
do?
you
Have
do, yeah.
4 at one point here.
Yeah. Because
Thank
how
you-
old's your
Thank you for
little?
doing your work.
Yeah. How old's your littlest one?
Yeah.
She's 2.
She's 2.
Two
Okay.
and a
So
half.
we got-
Yeah. So, and my daughter Natalie went to Castle Rock Early Learning.
Oh yeah.
I
love
so I, both Catherine and I are very invested in seeing this district succeed, seeing
Yeah.
you succeed. And I think that
Awesome.
anybody who's genuine in this community also feels the same way, that
I
they want
appreciate
our
that.
schools to succeed.
Yes.
And
Yes.
serve our children
Mhm.
the best that they possibly can.
Yeah.
So I think we need to keep that in mind.
Absolutely.
We do.
And that's where I'm coming from. So
Yeah, I appreciate
thank
that.
you for sitting down with me.
Oh,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Thanks,
I
Tom.
appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure it's been a heck of a week. So
Yes, it
hang in
has.
there
Thank
and,
you. You too.
yeah,
We appreciate
we'll
it.
be in touch.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for helping
Right
to
on.
get information out. We appreciate that. So you have a set of loyal followers who
Absolutely.
who anticipate your updates coming out. So we hope that they'll anticipate this one as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I'm glad that we had this sit down.
Yeah.